All right, welcome back, Wolf Pack. This is Fox Disease here. Dire Wolf is
Right
here
here.
shortly. Oh, there you are. There you are. How you
Hey,
doing
you
tonight,
stole my
buddy?
line. How dare you?
Well, somebody was not quite ready, so I had to improvise.
Two cubs are having a little trouble going to sleep. All right.
By improvise, I mean I looted your line and then I destroyed your business.
What you're telling me is first you stole my childhood and then my line. We need to have a conversation.
I did it peacefully though, so it doesn't count as bad because
Yes.
I said that I did it peacefully.
But we
and-
also learned recently that though words are literal violence, actual violence is not.
Yes. However, killing a former police officer in the middle of the street is not violent. So,
Right.
and also, also apparently, according to Jim Acosta, throwing a brick is peaceful.
No sound apparently.
Oh God. Well, I'm sound. Who doesn't have sound?
That was it was Shadow Wolf says no sound unless this is an old message.
It says it's sending sound. It's possible it's not sending sound, but it says.
Is it possible, Shadow Wolf, that you just have us muted?
Oh, well,
There was no sound there.
yeah, I'm not okay. Well, that's fine. We'll deal with that. That's. I'm more worried about can you hear us speaking?
Now the intro, not a problem.
Shut up. There was no sound on the intro that played 3 minutes ago. Thank you very much.
So helpful.
You're hired.
That's why we pay him the big bucks.
Yes. All right. Much appreciation. As long as you guys can hear us now, that's great. Well, I mean, it's good for us. I don't. You guys. It's up to you guys if you guys think it's good if you can hear us or not.
Watch the rest of the show, then decide.
Yeah, we'll see that. So, we're playing around a little bit, but I think that kind of highlighted what tonight's theme is. We're going to be talking about the riots, which is the only news, because the other only news that we had for 3 months is apparently gone. It's no more coronavirus, so now we got to deal with the riots. So that's.
It feels like we have just orchestrated controversy after orchestrated controversy. Maybe there's a reason. Is this some sort of season we might be in that might be leading the media and certain political pundits to try to make problems worse?
Yeah, I think we're in the astrologic Aries or it's whatever the water bearer one is. I forget. I don't know. It's stuff's going crazy. I think the Mayans were just a little bit early with their prediction.
Possibly.
So, but like I said, tonight we're talking about the riots and a little reminder to all you guys. I think it's stuff that you guys already know, but we like to reiterate just because. Well, it's important that we all kind of have these ideas, or we kind of see the world for what it is. That's one of the burdens of being on the conservative libertarian side of things, is that usually your worldview aligns with reality, which is sometimes a lot tougher than just living in a fantasy world. But it's sometimes helpful, even if we are saying things that are maybe not that far out opinions. They're just very standard ideas, or we're reiterating things that you guys probably already know, but maybe are scared to talk about. It is helpful to know that you're not alone out there. So tonight, I want to remind you that no one in power gives a damn about you at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And that's tonight's theme, as the rioting and looting and murder have swept the streets of America's great again, up until recently, and now bad again, cities. It is important to remember that only you can keep yourself safe. If that means avoiding the situation entirely, so be it. Certainly if you are living in a big city right now, maybe hop on Zillow. But do not, under any circumstances, think that anyone but yourself will be able to rescue you. Your life depends on knowing that. Do you want to read that part there?
One moment, please.
Dyer broke my speech cadence here. He's just that's worse than stealing my childhood.
Okay, so probably the biggest takeaway from the over there,
Yeah.
the recent COVID crisis, which is over, by the way, is that when electing our leaders, it is important to consider that we are electing them to manage a crisis. We aren't electing them for what they'll do when everything's is running just fine. We're electing them for what they will do in a crisis. No one knew COVID was going to sweep the nation when they voted last election. But the consequences of that vote came to bear during the crisis, when many found that they were unsatisfied with how their government officials decided to handle the crisis, mainly the destruction of small businesses and the suspension of civil liberties.
Yeah, just those little things.
Which again, as we've said many times, it came down to local politics, and it wasn't actually, voting for Trump that determined who did and who did not have their liberties intact and who had their businesses destroyed. It was the governors and small and little tyrants running cities.
That's very strange because the current riot crisis also seems to be mainly around local politics. As much as everybody likes to aggregate this into a nationwide thing, it's really specific pockets of the nation. There is 100 cities burning in the last week, but there's thousands and thousands of cities in America. Most of them, because guess what? Most local politics is conservative because there's more conservative cities and districts and towns than there are liberal ones, because liberals tend to concentrate into these little tiny clusters of just awfulness. Some might call them shitholes. So
some of them are literal shitholes. Look at LA.
So we're gonna go through that again this this week, or we're getting to see that again this week. That this local politics is what is the most important. And with the back-to-back crisis of insurrection now playing out in basically every major city, every major liberal city, and the nation finds itself stuck with those same inept leaders that they had under COVID, now managing, or in some fostering, race riots and the physical destruction of every small business that had been financially destroyed by those same politicians under COVID policy.
Yeah, being financially destroyed wasn't enough. They had to actually burn them down and salt the earth.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, whatever businesses managed to cling to life, or were probably, to a greater extent, a lot of those businesses were probably already dead on paper. They were financially ruined, and on paper they were already destroyed. And then the rioters in the last week just came by and finished them off physically by removing, razing to the ground, the physical location is gone. I was talking to my mom today, and we my hometown is within 30-40 minutes of one of the bigger cities that's under problems right now. And she was talking about how sad it was because there was some nice local restaurants there that she liked to frequent with family and friends. And they had a few of those were on her hit list for after the COVID lockdown ended. And she was excited. They had that kind of a list, and they were going to kind of do a tour towards the end of the summer, going to all everybody's favorite places, making sure they were spending money at their favorite local businesses and restaurants, and helping do what they can. And she was watching a good 3 or 4 of them that were on her specific list, burning down on TV, and she was like, I had to turn it off. But yeah, it is, these little restaurants that are barely scraping by, if not completely dissolved under COVID, and then if they happen to have made it past that, now we're going to burn it down. It's fantastic. Thank you, politicians. So tonight we are going to highlight the Democrat elites who have actively relegated every law-abiding citizen to second class, as they have vehemently defended the rights of criminals to peacefully burn down your homes, your cars, and your businesses. As they have vehemently defended the rights of peaceful terrorists to assassinate law enforcement, destroy historic landmarks, and terrorize the public. Peacefully, of course.
Oh my god.
Sarcasm, guys. It's funny because I'm saying it sarcastically, but I'm also I'm not parodying the mainstream media. I'm actually saying verbatim what the mainstream media is saying. I was telling Dyer yesterday, I almost choked to death because it was funny, and then it was very sad because I realized that it was real and it wasn't parody. On Tuesday, during a White House press conference, the new press secretary. I don't remember what her name is, but she's pretty cute, and she's a hell of a firecracker. But she was explaining that Trump he wasn't the one that gassed. Well, first off, there was no gas for the protesters to get out of Lafayette Park, and they had been moved out of Lafayette Park because they were throwing bricks and frozen water bottles. And she said the rioters were throwing bricks and frozen water bottles. That is why we moved them out of there. And I swear to God, within 2 seconds of her saying that, Jim Acosta stood up, interrupted her, and said, "But they were doing that peacefully." we discussed this, Dyer, that we assume that he probably didn't mean it like that. It was just his NPC script got stuck on the wrong one. But
yeah,
it was just unironically, she says they were throwing bricks, and he responds with, "Yeah, but they were doing that peacefully." Thank you, thank you. And that's the sentiment, the unironic sentiment that has been going on all over the mainstream media, and a lot of Democrats and your bigger politicians explaining it like that. And so when I say it ironically, it's we realize that I'm saying it ironically, but you've got a lot of leftists right now who actually believe that, which is very scary.
One of the worst parts of this, obviously it's the loss of life and the loss of people's sense of safety in their communities, or even worse than the division. This is just going to divide the communities, right? This is doing nothing to bring us together. It's doing nothing to solve any problems. But I think the worst part of this is it's times like this that create hatred and create bigotry. You are creating the evil that you claim that exists by going out and randomly attacking people. You're making them hate you and not at all care about your problems.
Yeah, and we were talking a couple days ago. I was remembering, I think it was back in November. It was a while ago. We broke down Nick Fuentes, who had kind of popped into some infamy at the time, and then he's kind of died down since then. But we were taking a look at who he was and what he believed, and kind of going through there because he was kind of in the news a little bit, at least in conservative circles. And I remember when I was researching him, I found him self-describing what his origin story was. Not what somebody said it was, but him himself personally narrating this is how he came to believe what he believed. And if you guys remember what we said, it was he doesn't believe very, very nice things about people that aren't white. But he said that he's basically ideologically born at the Charlottesville riots. He saw the unrest there. He saw the cops standing down, and it scared him. And he realized that, wrongfully, he realized that the only way to get around that was that they needed to have a much stronger centralized government and an ethno-state to get around that. And he was born ideologically out of a need for safety. And right or wrong, I can at least understand where that came from.
It's actually a natural human response, for immature but still human response. Yes. When you think that, there's literally people out there in these crowds whose goals are to kill white people, right? That is their goal. They are black supremacists. They think that white people should be subjugated and should be oppressed the way they say that black people are, even though they're not. And when you see someone like that freely attacking and hurting people like you, and the government doing nothing, and society saying what they're doing is morally justified, you don't feel safe, and you want to fight back against it. You want to find allies that will come to your side to fight for your tribe that's under attack. That is a normal human response. It's not a mature one, because what you're doing is there is a cycle of hatred. Someone is attacking you for something you haven't done just because of who you are, and that makes you feel unsafe, makes you feel angry, makes you want vengeance. But then if you go on and do that to someone else or another group because you want an outlet for that outlet for that anger you have from the victimization from earlier, you're just passing it on and making that person or that group have the same hatred, the same anger, and the same want for vengeance, and it
Well,
just keeps
it
passing
does.
it down through the generations.
It doesn't necessarily have to even be for vengeance too. It can just be a need for safety. You've got
Yeah,
the
there's a
left.
list of things.
Yeah, the
You know,
left is saying, like I said, he was, Nick came to believe what he believed because he needed to feel safe, and as you were saying, this is going to breed probably a lot more people with that same belief. They're going to feel backed into a corner. The left has segregated off other racial groups, other your protected classes, and all that stuff, and you got a lot of people that are they're left with their backs against the wall, and they don't feel like they're part of the American community anymore because the left has done its best to cordon off and segregate the American community as much as possible. And you've got these kind of leftover people, mainly of a majority demographic, who feel like they don't really have any other choice. I mean, there are other choices, but that is the psychology behind it. And this situation is going to lead to a lot of people falling into that psychology,
yeah.
unfortunately.
And a big part of that is the not just the violence being perpetrated by the rioters. That's obviously the first problem. The second problem that compounds it by magnitudes is that the government is not protecting the people, and they're allowing it. So it's bad when someone is a violent criminal and who harms someone. It's worse when you lose all faith in the government in its ability to protect you from such crimes, when they act with impunity. And let's move on and see how they are doing that.
All right. So, first up, we have New York. Oh boy, New York. So, we've talked about New York quite often on this show.
Not a fan.
Yeah, they're really a shining example of the worst of American cities. So, more than 400 looters were let out of jail in New York this week. They took part in the looting and the rioting and the broad-scale destruction over the weekend, and they were released from prison almost immediately because of New York City has new bail reform, which eliminated cash bail, which is a story that we covered at the beginning of the year. And basically, one of the kind of sadly comedic stories that came out of that was the first week that they had implemented this back in June. A guy had robbed a bank. He got arrested. He was released on this cashless bail, and then he robbed another bank the day after. It was
And
nuts.
joked about it.
Yeah, and so you cycle that up to this kind of broad scale destruction. There's whole iconic streets in New York right now that are just absolutely destroyed. Like everything below the third floor is just gutted right now, and these people. These terrorists who do have terrorist ties, which is probably something we'll be talking about during this too. These terrorists were arrested rightfully, and then because of these senseless liberal policies, they were re-released right back out in the street, and likely went on to keep doing violent stuff. And then this also comes on the back of, New York's been doing this cashless bail for 6 months. They've had these criminals being just re-returned out to the streets over and over again. And then they've also for the last 3 months, New York has been releasing lots of prisoners under the guise of preventing COVID spread. And so you had a city that was unable to contain criminals when they captured them, who was re-releasing already, safely stored away criminals in the jail system, re-releasing them out on the streets. And then you've got this whole riot thing, and you just have the streets of New York are just packed with criminals. And the cops are completely unable to get those streets cleared. And it's really no wonder that that this happened. And even daring all of this, the Democrats are still standing by this idea that, the looters and the rioters, since they were doing it peacefully, they really shouldn't be arrested. They really shouldn't be in jail. And they just, generally, the Democrats the leftists in power, they have no care whatsoever for you. No care for the law-abiding citizen. The law-abiding citizen is a second-class citizen. You are second to the terrorist. You are second to the rooter or the looter and the rioter and the murderer?
What is more immoral? Because was it, Poole, Tim Poole said that it was inhumane to force criminals to be into a jail where it could be they could get COVID-19. He said it would be inhumane in one of his videos. What is more inhumane? The possibility that someone might get sick with a disease inside a jail while they're serving a punishment for a crime they've committed, or releasing that violent criminal onto society and then doing that multiple times over. What's the greater evil? What preserves the most life? You know?
Well, as long as they're murdering peacefully. We have a few Streamlabs here that I apparently don't have sound for. I'm not sure why. But Slowpoke said, for $2, the riots not only breed hatred and distrust against the black community, but more importantly, puts that very community in the worst place as their homes and businesses are gone. They have nothing to go back to, and the idiots say it's just property. Triumvirate for $10. Thank you very much, Slowpoke, and thank you, Triumvirate, for the $10. Triumvirate says, I am so glad I have been away from the internet for the last week. I would have a giant throbbing red lump on my forehead from face palming so much. On the bright side, the Dems and the media will win the gold medal in dumbassery in the Summer Olympics, which are going to be held next winter. Sadly.
I'm sad to find out I was beat out for that award.
Yeah, you get the award for asshattery. How about that?
Oh, that's runner-up. It's all right. So the whole these communities, they're victims of more crime. And I'm saying the minority communities.
Well, this is really about class, right? This is about your economic distributions, much less so about race. It's much more about how much money you taking home at the end of the day.
That's what I'm getting into. So basically, the more a larger portion of the minority community are in these areas that have more poverty, and that's where there's a lot more crime, and they are the primary victims of said crime, as well as also being the primary perpetrators of said crimes, because poverty drives people to those kinds of situations from a myriad of reasons. But by destroying their businesses and their homes and the places where they work, you're dooming those communities to an even deeper poverty, which correlates directly to more crime and more victimization by those crimes. So you've just put back those communities years, many, many years, sometime generations. They like to talk about generational wealth. You've taken away the life savings of multiple black people, and they will not be able to recover it in their lifetime. And you're saying this is a justice to try to correct the oppression of black people? You are actively oppressing black people right
now. How easy do you think it's going to be to get a mortgage for a business property in any of these cities in those areas now?
For a very long time, very difficult. There's a certain very liberal female on Twitter who I talk with a lot, or I say talk, I think it's more just argue a lot with. And she's like, this is a good thing, that this is how change happens, by going and, harming the people that you're pretending to care for. I'm like, but you don't live in those communities. You are really well off. You're unaffected by this. It's really easy to be callous about the loss of life and property when it's not affecting you, but you'd have a hell of a lot different opinion if it was someone you cared about that was being killed by these rioters, or if it was your business or your place of work that was being destroyed. And it has not moved the needle in any way of finding justice. They like to say that because of these riots, that's why the police officer was arrested. It would have happened regardless because of protests without riots, because everyone agreed that guy was wrong.
Well, no, it wouldn't have happened without the protests either. It probably should have happened a little quicker. We've talked about this too. There's some blue privilege when a crime is committed, that we have an uncomfortable number of stories. Maybe it's not the rule or the trend, but there is an uncomfortable number of stories of police committing verified crimes and it taking a very long time for them to be arrested and charged with said crime, when we know for a fact that any civilian who is in that situation would be immediately on the spot arrested for that. But it usually takes days or weeks for cops in these situations to see that same sort of treatment, which is a systemic problem. I will stand next to anyone who is talking about that and say, yes, I agree that is a problem. There's a lot of problems with all kinds of institutions here in America, not necessarily racially, but there is problems with those who have power over us and those who do not. That is a typical libertarian position, actually. And so it's, there's those sorts of things should have and they would have happened without the protests. But because they were slow to do it, as there seems to be a trend with, they didn't do the arrest until after the protests and the rioting. And now it appears as though there's this correlation between rioting and getting these former police officers arrested and charged. I don't think it's a causation. I don't think that the riots are why they were charged. I think that they would have been charged regardless. But now it appears, because they slow walked the arrest, it appears as though there's a correlation. And so this is going to be used in the future by these kinds of groups saying, well, last time we burned down 10 cities. We burned down, I think it was more than 10 cities, burned down 50 cities, and we got the arrests that we want. Now they're nitpicking over which specific charges they're giving. So, maybe another 10 cities will get the charges that they're looking for. But next time this happens, they're going to say, well, it worked last time. Let's burn down some more cities. We'll get what we want. And that could have been easily solved by Minneapolis immediately charging those guys. Again, being charged does not mean that you're guilty of a crime. It just means you're suspected of a crime, and we will start investigating after you're charged. They could have done that a lot earlier. That's a massive mistake on their part. But yeah, now we're gonna have the protesters and the rioters thinking that the way to get this stuff done is to do what they did, burn down those cities.
But you have a problem with protesting, right? Like, it would have been totally fine for people to protest what happened because it was unjust, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think that a lot of us, especially on the right, after this happened last week, were, is clearly wrong. And I think, there should have been, there should be some demonstrations outside of the police station, outside the city hall, asking, hey, why is it that, this cop is in physical contact with somebody and they die, and he's not arrested or charged with murder, but if that happened to anyone else that was not wearing a uniform, they would be immediately arrested and the investigation would happen later. What you guys did was you guys kind of investigated it before, and then after, very slowly dragging your feet, you then arrested him. Why is it that cops get special treatment? That's a valid question. That would have been valid reason to go out there and do some demonstrations. Peaceful.
And there is something that we do need to do that would help out a lot with at least getting bad cops off the force. That we just, even though we've known this to be a problem for a long time, we haven't addressed it. It's very hard to get a cop fired unless they have something big in profile, a high profile like this. They often can have multiple, disciplinary things that each would be a good reason to fire them, but because of the police union, they have more hoops to jump through to actually get someone fired. That's a lot more disciplinary action to finally get to that point. So you have a cop that has it showing a trend that they are not a reliable cop, and they could stay on the force until they do something big. They get not only ends up someone being killed, but it's bad for everyone else as well. It's bad for the department. Everyone now thinking every cop there is a bad cop because they allowed this cop to stay on the force, right? And also an additional add-on to the story about George Floyd. I don't know if you know this, but you know that the cop that was kneeling on his neck, he was a instructor cop. He was teaching the other two cops that were kneeling on him further down on his body. So when you leave a bad cop on the force, that's a senior cop, he's going to pass on the bad things he does, teach other cops those things too. And that's how you get a systemic problem in a police force.
And we know that he was a questionable cop because it's come out that he has a long list of citations in his record as to problems with how he went about handling situations, and after all that, he was still out there on the force,
Teaching other cops.
So there's some problems out there. There's some reason to go outside and hold some signs outside a city hall, to go up with a list of grievances and ask for redress peacefully. But now it looks like, well, that doesn't work, so we're just gonna have to burn down the cities because that's what gets us the action that we're looking for. So kind of. Not really moving on here, just kind of more of the same, is in addition to New York releasing all of the looters and rioters and presumably the murderers for various reasons, because they don't give a damn about the people. They're not the only city doing that. We got St. Louis is doing that. And these are just a couple of the cities that we picked out. There's a lot of cities doing this. St. Louis had... Let's see here. Their circuit attorney, Kim Gardner, she released all of the people that were arrested on Sunday and Monday this past week who were arrested for looting and rioting. For some context, on Tuesday in St. Louis, former police captain David Dorn was shot and killed by a looter. I wonder if there's some correlation there. It's probably unlikely that the guy who murdered David Dorn was one of those people that was released, but it's possible. Certainly, had he been arrested, he would have been released to go out and kill. I wonder how many of those looters and rioters, because if you're looting and rioting and you get arrested, you're probably not going to sit back and be like, oh man, I really screwed up. If they release you, you'll be like, well, I'm not doing anything else tonight. I'm probably going to go back out. And I wonder whose small business got burned down by one of those people that Kim Gardner released. Same thing in New York. Whose windows got smashed in, whose car got firebombed,
they'd have the right to sue the government for doing that.
Certainly.
Now, I'll point out that New York releasing those 400 people were not even following their own law, because their law, or their regulation, had said that they were going to only be releasing people without bail if they qualified for bail. Now, people with violent crimes or were a flight risk, so there's two groups here: people who are a danger to society, like, I don't know, burning down businesses and attacking people, throwing firecrackers at people and throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff. Those are a justification for saying that it was a violent crime, and that thus they wouldn't be qualified for bail in the first place, so they wouldn't be qualified for the free bail either. And then you also have people who are in some percentage of the people that were arrested were from outside the state. So those people are a flight risk because they have no reason to stay in New York because they don't live there. Thus, if you let them go, they will probably go home, and then it'll be harder to get them again. Right?
Yeah.
So they didn't qualify for bail. They shouldn't have been released at all.
So St. Louis also was doing the COVID releases over the past few months, and there's basically every city in America was, especially the liberal controlled ones, was doing this release of these prisoners for COVID reasons. We could go on and on and on with that list. That's stuff that we've already talked about. These are a few of the stories that we know of for sure, where they were releasing, people who were arrested for the looting specifically in the last 2 weeks here. And then I'm sure that there's more cases of this, but these are the two that are being reported on so far. We also have in Minneapolis, there was a fund started where I don't know why they're eligible for bail once again. The fact that they're even eligible for bail is also nearly the same as just letting them go. There's a fund being set up for anybody who was arrested rioting in Minneapolis. And again, Minneapolis was one of the worst hit cities, just untold damage and destruction. So if you were arrested in there, you're probably not fit to be out in society. There was a fund started that would pay the bail for these people to get them back out of jail and back out on the streets. And people that were contributing to that bail fund included Joe Biden's campaign staffers. who looking into it, I know it was kind of implied in conservative media that it was the Joe Biden campaign itself, and from what I can see, it was the campaign staffers, but they were kind of saying that they were bragging about donating to this fund and supporting getting these rioters back out of jail so they could, presumably go on to riot some more. It appeared as though they were doing that kind of in their capacity as a political motivation. So I think it is somewhat fair to say that is a
bold move, Biden's workers. We support terrorism.
Yeah, it's somewhat justified to say that, though I think some of the conservative media overblew that a little bit. But in addition to multiple Joe Biden campaign staffers supporting getting these rioters back out on the street to burn down your businesses and your homes, we also had just countless high-profile celebrities, especially out of Hollywood, that were also very elated to be donating, hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the utter destruction of minority communities. Thank you guys. That's very, very much appreciated that you guys are, using your privilege and your power, your economic privilege and power, to make sure that the little guy stays as down on his luck as he possibly can during this. Much appreciated.
That's so terrible.
But yeah, so if you politicians, if they do happen to make some effort of keeping this filth off your street, rest assured, other high-profile Democrats are going to sweep in and do their best to make sure they get back out on that street. I don't see nearly as many high-profile celebrities condemning this stuff. When they do, they tend to get ripped apart by their supposed peers. But the Democrats and the liberals, they are not interested in your safety. They are going to do everything in their power to make sure that your cities are as unsafe for you as possible. As I assume that you guys are law-abiding citizens. Maybe one of you guys is secret Antifa. My money's on Shadow Wolf. But for the most part, you guys, law-abiding citizens, you guys are second class compared to all this. You don't get $24,000 from Chrissy Teigen or whoever the hell she is, to rebuild your business that got burned down by the rioters. But that rioter, he's sure as hell going to get his bail paid for so he can come back out and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, why don't they just take that money and donate it to the community if they really want to help that community?
Oh, they are donating to the community for their own entertainment. They're donating it to see that community.
The destruction of said community.
Yes.
That's not quite the same thing as what I was implying.
Financed by Hollywood. Thank you.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's a big difference between this and the LA riots. They're talking about doing comparisons to that, but I don't think that Hollywood and the DNC was financing the LA riots. Certainly they are this time.
I mean, it's going to look really bad when you look back in history and they have these recorded statements and people are going to see, wow, we had an entire political party in a large part of the country supporting terrorism and the destruction of their own country.
Yeah, that happened in Germany one time, but they didn't notice that until we came in and explained it to them.
Yeah.
I wonder who would be left to come in and explain it to us if we got that far down the road.
Yeah, well, I mean, the next biggest power kind of like...
The next biggest power is just rule America. Who saves America from a revolution? The other part of America. That's the only ones we can count on.
Oh my. So what we're seeing in some states, like you said, is very different from what we're seeing in other states. It's a very lopsided effect of these riots. So do you think that since the majority of actually all the violence and rioting is happening in very liberal places, do you think they're red pilling anybody that lives in those areas?
Well, there's a lot of reports that gun sales are at absolute record highs. New gun owners are at absolute record highs. And I know I'm going to be starting to look for something here relatively shortly. Certainly we've seen in the instances where the police are. We're seeing a lot of instances of the police standing down. A lot of these cities, especially the first few nights, there's broad-scale police stand-downs. We've seen that a lot in other various protest-turned riots over the last few years. Those ones obviously a lot more localized. This somehow spread across the whole nation and into parts of Europe too, which is very, very strange. Almost like it's an international conspiracy. But we've seen this as kind of a trend in these liberal cities that the mayors will tell the cops to stand down and let the rioters do what they do. Let them destroy, let them get it out of their system and all that stuff. Let them peacefully burn out cars and smash in cop windows and all that stuff. And we're seeing that again with this time, where there was a lot of cops standing down. Some states sent in the National Guard. I think we're going to talk about it here in a little bit. Saw the National Guard not standing down but taking a knee instead, which is probably a little bit worse. And so you're going to see a lot of these areas. Certainly, your more liberal people, your liberals that are supporting this, they are your more wealthy elite class. There's several instances in the last few weeks here of rich liberals saying things on Twitter supporting the burning destruction of minority poor communities. And then all of a sudden the riots start headed their way and they're like, get that shit out of here. And they don't want anything to do with it. And the cops are nowhere to be seen because they've already stood down. And I think we're seeing a lot of success for your small business owners that are standing on their roof with their guns. Several stories of that now. And that they're having success at defending their property. Your individuals on the street, they're seeing people getting drug out of their cars, certainly truck drivers. You've got a lot of people in the community who are seeing, either they're seeing a business that was burned out and destroyed, or they're seeing a business that has several armed men from their community protecting and guarding it. And all the people that are, the people that own that business, their family members, people that are friends of them, people that patron that business, they're all going to see that and say, hey, that's what the Second Amendment was for. I understand it now. I didn't understand it back during, quote unquote peacetime, but now that stuff's like this, I understand it. And so this is giving, to the extent that we're not going to fall over the edge, this is giving everybody a good solid peek over the edge. And I think a lot of people, to the extent that we're going to be able to pull ourselves back, they're going to say, yeah, I think we're going to need to have some of those gun policies rolled back. I think that we're going to need to see a more fervent Second Amendment culture, a more more personal responsibility for your own safety. That's what we started off with here. Was you need to have personal responsibility for your own safety because you never could, but it's very obvious now. Now we have example after example after example of it. You cannot rely on your government to protect you. You cannot rely on your city officials or your police officers or any of them to protect you, because when it mattered most, when it absolutely mattered the most, when you've got the horde ready to burn down your business, ready to burn down your car, pulling people out of their homes, shooting store owners and stuff like that in the middle of the street, killing them. When it mattered the most, those people all put their hands up and said, not my problem. Not my problem at all. And you realize it's your problem. And then you realize that you didn't have a gun, or you weren't allowed to carry a gun in that area because there's a no gun zone or something like that. And you realize, that was because of these liberal policies. We ought to do something about that.
Yeah. Now, the police, obviously, when they stand down, they're not doing their job. But I have kind of some sympathy for some of the police departments that are not doing anything, because I know that the government in those areas do not support them either, right? They're just as soon as prosecute the police officer for doing his job as they would, arrest a store owner for, using his constitutional right to defend himself, right?
Yeah.
And his property, which is, it's a reasonable fear to have.
Yeah, so I'll bite on that for a second. So yeah, I believe I was talking about this earlier too. Is the type of violence that we're seeing, and again, I think we said this last night, and we talked about this on Saturday. There was some circumstantial evidence that there was pre-planning and coordination by somebody, probably Antifa. Since Saturday, we said at the time, it wasn't that we didn't believe it, it was just that we didn't see good evidence for it. Since then, we've seen lots and lots of good evidence for that it is very obvious there is, there is accelerants, gasoline water bottles, there is pallets of bricks, there is tools and coordination going on from Antifa, from Antifa-affiliated groups that are trying to make sure that these riots are as absolutely violent as possible, and they are organizing it to be as violent as possible. Antifa, it is a terrorist organization. The Trump administration is working on making that official. But like I said, I'll bite on your thing there for a second. That the cops, it is fair to say that they probably can't handle this. The police are meant to handle your more run-of-the-mill crimes. They're not meant to handle organized insurgency from a terrorist organization, an international terrorist organization at that, because Antifa is worldwide. The people that are meant to prevent terrorist organizations from gaining this much of a foothold in America is supposed to be the FBI, and I just can't help but wonder what the FBI was doing for the last 5 years while Antifa was gaining enough of a footprint in America to have organized something like this across 50 to 60 cities.
They've been distracted with very important stuff.
Yes, I wonder what it was that the FBI was doing for the last 3 to 5 years. I just can't put my finger on it. Certainly they have hundreds, maybe thousands of agents and people. I wonder what they were doing that wasn't making sure that a international terrorist organization didn't get a foothold in America. What is it they could possibly have been doing? Do you know, Dyer? Do you remember?
I would say possibly they were trying to unseat a rightly elected president. They were doing the whole Russian collusion thing. They almost the entirety of their focus was trying to subvert our democracy.
Oh, so it wasn't that they weren't aware of Antifa. It's just that they had adjacent goals. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Glad we cleared that up.
Hope that makes you feel better about the situation.
But my point being, though, is that Antifa is a little bit next level. That is something that should have been more seriously taken on by federal agencies prior to your police having to deal with it. I mean, Dyer, you're familiar with how your terror organizations in the Middle East function and what it takes to fight and combat them. And, how do you think the police would have handled ISIS just having a foothold in America? Was that something that's in their ability to actually combat?
They lack the intelligence as it is in the information, not the brains. They're probably that as well. They lack the tactics. They lack the people, the manpower to do that job. There's an entire organization in the U.S. government that is meant to take on those risks.
And they were absolutely derelict in their duty.
That the police can't double that. They can't do their job and that job, for which there's a very large organization with international intelligence gathering capabilities. They don't have that.
Trevor, I'll go if anybody wants to start protesting central banking, I'll go out on the street for that. I saw some people that were like, "Hey, can you guys go check out the Federal Reserve? Maybe leave the mom and pop stores alone. Like, let's go take a look at the Fed." And I was like, I can kind of get behind that. Like, I won't openly say that, but I feel that a little bit. I've got some questions. If we have some anger to direct in a certain direction, and not to get too far off into my political or my financial musings. If anybody's responsible for how we got to this point in time, it's most of the Federal Reserve. A lot of this is based off of At its core, it is a problem with wealth inequalities and disparities between different groups. Your super rich are getting even super richer, and your regular people are kind of on this treadmill that's sending them backwards as fast as they possibly can. It's really hard to run on that, especially after COVID. Trump gave us a bit of a respite from that kind of economy, but all of the economic woes the last 20 years, the dot-com bubble, the housing crisis, thank you very much, Obama, for the stimulus and the bailout packages. All of that was managed and created by the Federal Reserve, and all of those things that have happened over the last 100 years really tie back to the Federal Reserve. And so, to the extent that maybe people should be angry at someone for causing the current state of affairs, I would say that maybe the Federal Reserve is at least a good candidate.
I can agree to that. But it does bother me that these rioters, their instinct is to go after the small mom and pops, and not that we are encouraging anyone go do the same violence to anyone or any other business. It seems there's an added layer of frustration over it makes no goddamn sense. For what did the black store owner of a small shop in that community, how did they contribute it to anything to do with police brutality or anything that affects your life in a negative way? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's part of that division. It's anybody who has something, they are your enemy. That is what the left has been trying to push out there. Is it's because the people, the black store owners, they're not really black. That's the way the left would see them.
Oh, you're giving them way too much credit to having thought through that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. No, it's just those who have and those who have not, and they're running around making sure that everyone has not, which is very anti-American.
Yes, it is. All right, what's our next topic?
Well, here's where we're gonna kind of go freewheeling, but we can kind of spin this into talking about the National Guard, which I can maybe look up that video here.
While you're doing that.
Yeah, okay. I'll look that up.
It was what state was that in, by the way?
I don't know, actually.
Okay, well, regardless, the National Guard were called into in one of the states with the riots, and they're there in their full battle rattle, vest, rifles, helmets, with additional like the face shields. I think they had those on. And they're there. Their mission was to protect businesses, but they were
and people. Right? They're to protect the law-abiding citizen.
Yes. So they're there in a security role, in a place where a lot of the people around them could just as easily be a violent rioter as they could be a peaceful protester, because they look exactly the same until they attack you. Right. Yeah. So they're there they have a mission, and there's also standing orders that you are not to make political statements or be involved in a political rally while in uniform, while on duty. So even if you're not wearing a uniform, but you are on duty hours, not on leave, you cannot leave during normal work hours for whatever that is.
They're representing your branch, your squad. You're not there representing a political ideology.
Exactly. And so
you're supposed to be neutral.
Right. And it doesn't matter how much you agree with the group or disagree with them, you're not to take part in the political messaging. You're not to be part of the political message. You're there to do your mission and do not engage elsewhere. But also it's important to know that as a military member, you are a target for propaganda. So when you go through combat training, part of your combat training is how to deal with when you get captured by the enemy and they inevitably try to exploit you as an American soldier for propaganda, and how they'll try to get you to do things that seemingly at the moment have no value, no real meaning to you. They aren't harming. You don't seem like you're breaking any laws. You're not harming someone. They're having you do something that doesn't make sense just to appease them. But if you do that, they're using it for photo ops and video ops where they're going to say something else about what you just did and say it has some other meaning to it, right?
Yes.
So they're going to try to play games with you to trick you into seemingly to support something or admit guilt or something like that, and you need to be mindful of that. And what happens in this video is very reminiscent of the hostile force that has captured you, trying to use these people for propaganda, because that's exactly what happened. Let's watch the video.
I want to hang up on you and call you back real quick, see if I can get Skype to reset, and so I can share my screen with you. So everybody bear with me for about 20 seconds here. You guys can still hear me, so I'll talk to you. Sometimes Skype is like the worst program ever invented. All right, let's see if I can actually share the screen this time. Let's try that one. Did that share something? Close enough. We'll go with that. Is that close enough, Dyer?
It's close enough.
All right. Let's no audio though. That's a problem. Man, Peter is just killing right now. Why is there no audio here? Very professional,
You there?
guys. Huh?
Nothing.
Well, heck. It's trying to play it. There we go. Let's see.
Y'all stand together.
There we go.
Saying once the looting starts, the shooting starts. You have a president talking about the Second Amendment as a use for people to come out here and use firearms against the people that are protesting. This is the messages that we're seeing. I don't know if you on social media, because the news don't tell you everything. But you have to pay attention to what's going on.
Use your Second Amendment against people who are suffering. Use Second Amendment against people who are trying to kill you and destroy your business.
We can't leave. You have people in here that need your help. This is when you and y'all stand together with the community, with society, to stop the governmental oppression. Period. We need you. So then march with us. March beside us. You get your people. Y'all march beside us. March beside us. March beside us. Let the revolution be televised. March beside us and show us that you're here for us.
Did you hear that? So, did you hear that? She's calling for revolution. She's calling for what is a revolution, Dyer? What's the definition of a revolution?
The government, definitely his employer.
Yeah. So she's sitting there trying to convince him to join her in the dissolution of his employer,
Yes.
which is the government. The government
Yes,
that
and the country through which he is sworn to defend. Also, I want to point out, she says something really stupid, that Trump has closed the borders, now we're all trapped inside. What the fuck are you talking about?
You know, it's funny because they're just babbling. Like, you see a lot of these videos and they're just kind of babbling stuff, and you know, you're like, wait a second, did they just say? Because it's just kind of incoherent in general. But sometimes you'll pick up on something like that, and it's like, that was really out of left field. There was that I'm sure everybody's seen that younger female that was getting arrested, and somebody starts screaming that the cops are withholding her dialysis after she'd been being arrested for approximately 20 seconds. And, you know, I had to rewind it a few times, but I don't think that over the course of 20 seconds it's possible to have withheld dialysis. But they just kind of say out like random things. But I do want to play that again. So she's speaking to National Guardsmen, and we'll spoiler alert here. Spoiler alert here. This video ends with these guys on their knees, bowing down. But she's asking them to join. She's asking representatives of the U.S. military, which, you know, National Guard. I'm sure Dyer has some words about that. But National Guard, you know, it's equivalent to the U.S. military. It's a representative branch of that. And they are here to defend all Americans. And she is requesting that he join her in overthrowing the nation to which he's sworn allegiance. Let's listen to that part again.
Y'all stand together with the community, with society, to stop the governmental oppression. Period. We need you. So then march with us. March beside us. You get your people. Y'all march beside us. March beside us. March beside us. Let the revolution be televised. March beside us and show us that you're here for us. Make history with us. Hey. Let's just do it. March with us. We'll start marching, and you march with us. Please.
Just two of you.
Do it. Just to come on. Be the change. Do it. Please do it. Please. We are good people. March with us.
make you a deal. Because I can't leave this post. I will march through this street with you guys to that next intersection.
I don't know.
From this intersection to that intersection, but I have to control this area.
Control. What is it to control, man? March with us. It was send a huge message. We just march. Just march with us. March the whole round with us. March you and your men. Y'all protect us. Protect us. Y'all march with us. March around like we just did. Do that march with us. Y'all stand beside us. No, you don't, because you the protector. So if you can't patrol yourself. If it's you that's supposed to be patrolling us, then walk with us.
I'm also protecting some of these businesses.
Okay. Okay.
Can you do me a favor?
Man.
Can you do me a favor? Can you take a kneel? Can you take a kneel?
I don't know. It ain't enough for me. It ain't enough for me.
Submit to the revolution.
It's a political statement. It is also tactically really stupid. Right?
So how much extra time has he added to having his weapon at the ready? Like how vulnerable of a stance is that?
He's already in a position where anyone could get to him, anyone in that crowd could get to him before he could raise his rifle. Now being on the ground, it is so easy for everyone kneeling to be subdued. Very easy. And you know what? This it's only take one time of a team of National Guard guys getting shot by their own rifles because they decided to be fucking dumbasses and kneel before someone that could just as easily be innocent, a bystander, or the enemy. Because you don't know. You have no idea which one is which right now in those protests.
Now I'll caveat that there has been a lot of videos, all unique in their own way, of local police marching with and engaging with the protesters. I will go ahead and say that because they were not in the process of currently rioting, I will say that woman is probably at the current moment in this video a protester, which is fine. But as you said, he doesn't know. I think it's perfectly fine for the police to engage with protesters, not rioters, because they're part of the community, and that's more of what their job. They're the civilian police. They're civilian law enforcement. That's what they're meant to be. They're meant to engage. The fact that the National Guard had to be brought in. The National Guard was not just brought in willy-nilly because just for whatever reason.
They brought for a reason.
Yes, they were brought in because they needed that extra oomph that was not part of the local community. They did not bring them in to do that same sort of civic engagement that they do with the cops. There was a reason they were brought in, and it wasn't so that he could be taking a knee like that. It is highly, highly inappropriate for them to be doing that. And we'll keep watching to the end here, but you can go ahead and keep talking. It's really just all the rest of them kneeling down, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's very important for the U.S. military and all of its branches to be politically neutral and not to be perceived as being subordinate of one group over another. Which is another reason why General Mattis' statements were very wrong. I think that was a young Butterbar, right? A lieutenant. Officer.
I don't know. I can zoom back for look at his patches here. I'm not as familiar as
a bronze bar on his chest. I believe he is the lowest ranking officer.
What's in the center of his chest there? Is that
picture's too small, man?
Let's see. He's got two upright bars on his chest there.
Are they black?
Yes.
Captain.
Okay.
Okay. So he's been in for at least 4 years. You should know better. I was trying to give him an excuse. I was trying to say he was brand new, just wanted people to like him. But
yeah, so I mean, you've talked to me before. You've had some training that would involve being in a situation where the enemy may be looking to. Is that a better view for you? Or
that's way better. That is definitely Captain. Yes.
Where the enemy may be looking to, like you said, getting propaganda out of you, and you've got techniques where you know that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to give them these propaganda videos, and as much as this video has been making the round in conservative circles, certainly you heard it in their voices how excited they were to get this victory of seeing a symbol of U.S. power, the military, the unlimited
kneeling
power.
Before them.
Yes, kneeling, bowing, submitting. There's another video which I don't think I'm going to be as easily able to find of a black National Guardsman, and the protesters are giving him absolute hell as being a race traitor. And I'd be curious to have this captain and that poor guy sit down in a room, watch both the videos of how they conducted themselves, and have a discussion about it, because this captain here is doing a severe dishonor to his other National Guard brothers there,
and he's giving
the
aid and comfort to the enemy, because these are the terrorist group of Antifa, this is something that they're doing in concert with these protesters. It's part of their narrative they're trying to push, right? Yeah. You are giving aid and comfort to that group. You are giving aid and comfort to the black nationalists who are just going to love the visual of white army American, symbols of America kneeling before Black Lives Matter.
So I'm gonna ironically push back on that a little bit, and I'm gonna undo my straw man I'm setting up for myself.
Okay.
She, at current, doesn't appear to be the enemy, could or could not be Antifa, possibly, but she's not currently engaged in violence. So how this might relate to a situation with a more traditional terror organization in a more traditional location like the Middle East is not everyone in the organization is out there being a combatant. There are some people out there that are responsible for the interrogations and the propaganda videos. The guy that is going to be trying to trick you into saying something stupid, or even they'll use members of the media to try to, if they capture a soldier over there, trying to work through the propaganda and working through the social networking aspect of it. And so Antifa has a similar setup, and it would appear that maybe she's not currently a combatant. Well, who knows what happens after the sun goes down, but she's certainly a part of that machine where not everyone's a combatant, but they all got a part to play. And so she is at current getting that propaganda win, and she's getting that juicy video clip that they can go around and use later. Like I said, you could hear how excited they were to get these guys to bow down to them. And so, again, like I was saying, I was pushing back on what you said, where she was the enemy, and maybe that's not.
No, she could be. She could also be innocent.
Yeah, but I'm just going through that. Maybe while it's not as apparent that she's the enemy, there's different categories of what an enemy of this type might look like. Where again, maybe she's not a combatant version of Antifa, but she is certainly part of that propaganda wing, which. As I'm sure you know, I'm sure you guys know too, out there in the audience, the propaganda arm of something like, say, ISIS is just as dangerous as the combat arm, because they're the ones that go out there and get the recruits. And something like this, a video like this, you're going to get a lot of people are going to be like, oh yeah, I want to see more military guys bowing down to me. I'm all for that.
Yeah. Now the only since we're pointing out a bad example of what they shouldn't have done. Let's talk about what they should have done. Just what the other National Guard guys were doing. The one who was getting yelled at.
I'll see if I can find that video. I don't know.
Stand guard. You are a calm, collected, professional soldier. You do not engage with the protesters. You are only going to do your mission. Everything else that's not your mission is not your focus. All right? So they can keep talking to you all they want. They can call you racist, demand anything they want. You stand sentinel until your skill set is necessary to stop someone from being hurt or property being damaged. That's what you do. They got in their fields. They wanted to be liked. That's the problem. Do your job. It's not about being liked.
Yeah, it's you probably got some people who had their businesses burned down, or their friend's car got firebombed, or the church got burned down, all that stuff, and they're saying, oh, thank God the National Guard finally came here because the coward cops stood down and didn't protect us. Thank God the National Guard's here. And then they see this and they're like, fuck, I'm completely alone. No one is here to help me. No one's here to save me. I cannot rely on any of the institutions of government I supposedly pay taxes to. I am totally on my own. I'm completely alone.
No, you don't have to pay taxes. Is it worthwhile?
Well, no, supposedly paying taxes to these organizations to help you for civic service. Not because otherwise taxation would just be theft, right? If your taxes don't go to civic service,
this is a scary road.
It's one might say that taxation could possibly be theft in that circumstance. It's possible. I don't.
You're starting to get suspicious.
I don't know. I told you COVID was blackfilling me.
No, you're right. If the taxes are not going towards actually doing the very few missions the government has, I guess I should not say missions. I'm stuck in the mindset of something else. Responsibilities. If they're not meeting their minimum responsibilities, but you're still paying taxes, it's gonna seem a hell of a lot like theft.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Though you got members. They're sitting there pretending like they're members of that community, when really that the members of the community that they're supposed to be trying to serve are seeing that and saying, "Oh wow, all right, well I see whose side you're on now, and I guess fuck me."
Yeah.
I don't think I can find that video, but yeah, there was this, like I said, there was another video of a black National Guardsman who was having a lot of people yelling very not nice things to him about race trading and all that sort of stuff. The typical racism that you see from the left. And he wasn't bowing down to anybody. For some reason, these guys felt like they had to. So.
Yeah.
But I guess we can kind of go on and on and on. But the theme here tonight was, it's unfortunately you can only rely on yourself, which is something that I think we all knew. Being self-reliance is a key.
It's a virtue.
Yeah, key virtue of the right, of conservatives, of libertarians. That's some of our core tenets are based off of self-reliance.
It was actually criticized as being a toxic masculinity by feminists, that being self-sufficient is a bad thing. I can't imagine. I'm not surprised at their point of view, because they'd love us to all be dependent on the state.
Yeah. So you gotta, I guess just keep making sure that you are able to take care of yourself, because the government is not going to be able to do that for you. Which, again, core tenet, where no one's asking for the government to come take care of us, but even those basic things that we know, nobody was like, well, I need the government to come take care of my health care. I think we're all pretty in line with that. I don't need that kind of help. But we kind of thought, well, law enforcement's there, the military's there, and now we're kind of seeing like, maybe not. Maybe it is just you. Maybe we live in Ancapistan and you have to pay taxes. Maybe it's the worst of both. is what we seem to be. We seem to be living under the worst of aid.
This is the dumbest timeline.
Yeah, we live under a republic where we have to pay taxes because of the social contract, but we get no benefit out of the other side of that contract. And then we also live in Ancapistan, where it's just a free for all, and there is no government services to help you out. So enjoy that.
Just remember all this when you vote. I mean, the current state of the government is a temporary state.
If people are you hearing friends, family members, coworkers, they're complaining about all this stuff going on. Say hey, remember this, and you got a local elections coming up. It's that people do not come out for the local elections, though. This year, people do come out for the local elections on a year that's divisible by 4 for certain reasons. So possibly there will be a lot of local politicians getting flipped around in November, which could be a good thing. I guess it was a little bit of happy coincidence that all this stuff happened right before a presidential election, because that actually gets people out to vote. So, people who maybe would have voted for different politicians but just are a little too lazy to get out every 4 or every year, they will get out for the presidential election. They will go pull that lever for hopefully Trump, but they'll also be looking at their local politicians too, and you'll have 3, 4, 5 times the voter turnout for local elections as what you would have during an off year. So hopefully hopefully this all gets remembered.
Yep. Well, I think that's it for today, right? All right. Well, we'll see you guys on Saturday for the weekly news recap with all the news, which I have a pretty good bet a lot of it's going to have to do with the riots. But there'll be more stuff, don't worry. I'll make sure it's not
something
just
about COVID being over.
Oh, yeah, there's something about that, too.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you guys on Saturday. Dire Wolf out.
All right, Spees signing off. See you guys.